On February 8, 1943, the winter sky over the Normandy countryside was pierced by the low hum of engines. Frost clung to the wings of Allied aircraft, and the biting cold stung exposed skin as pilots adjusted their helmets and checked gauges. The fields below lay dormant under a pale winter light, the land scarred from months of relentless bombing and troop movements. A single formation of P-47 Thunderbolts cut through the morning fog, their silver fuselages gleaming, engines roaring like a chorus of defiance. From the air, the German lines seemed formidable, yet there was an unseen shift in the wind, a harbinger of shock soon to descend on those who had ridiculed the heavy American fighter. The P-47 was born from necessity, a response to an era where air superiority was measured in speed and maneuverability. Early designs in the late 1930s were met with skepticism. Critics dismissed the aircraft as too cumbersome, too ponderous, and too reliant on brute force rather than finesse. European aviation experts, steeped in the elegance of Messerschmitts and the agility of Spitfires, scoffed at the idea that a nearly 8,000-pound aircraft could dominate the skies. It was a time when aerodynamic grace was celebrated over resilience, and the notion of mounting 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns in a single fighter was seen as overkill. Yet, within the steel frame of the Thunderbolt lay a latent power, a combination of raw horsepower and engineered endurance that few could yet imagine. As the first sorties of the P-47 entered German airspace, expectations collided with reality. Luftwaffe pilots, trained in the art of dogfighting against nimble opponents, anticipated the usual evasive dance. A series of quick maneuvers, testing flanks and altitude in a deadly game of aerial chess. They expected easy prey, an aircraft that would falter under their attacks. Instead, they encountered something heavier, more imposing, and profoundly different. The Thunderbolt did not weave like its European counterparts. It charged. Its radial engine, nearly twice the size of many contemporaries, thundered with a consistency that felt inexorable. Each burst of its 8.50 caliber guns shredded aircraft fabric and armor alike, leaving German pilots scrambling in disbelief, their meticulous tactics unraveling under a hail of fire they had not anticipated. Historical records from the European theater document the astonishment with which the Luftwaffe met the P-47. One after-action report described encounters with the Jug as a force that appeared from nowhere and returned like a storm, noting its indestructible fuselage and merciless armament. Intelligence reports compiled from interrogations of captured German aviators reveal recurring astonishment. The Americans' fighters were not just surviving engagements, they were dominating them. Allied commanders noted a dramatic shift in air superiority in sectors where the Thunderbolt operated, its presence alone providing a protective umbrella over bombers and ground forces alike. The transformation wrought by the P-47 was not merely tactical. It reshaped perception. German pilots, conditioned to underestimate American aircraft, began to recognize that size and firepower, when combined with rugged engineering and pilot discipline, could equal or surpass maneuverability in determining the outcome of air combat. The psychological effect rippled through the skies. What had once been derided became feared, not for elegance, but for an uncompromising, almost brutal efficacy. It was a lesson that reached beyond individual squadrons, influencing broader strategic calculations in the European campaign. Throughout these engagements, one symbolic element remained a constant: the sound of the P-47's engines. That growl, deep and unwavering, became more than a mechanical note. It was a herald of American industrial might, a tangible representation of abundance and resolve. Pilots later recounted how even before entering visual range, the roar of the Thunderbolt instilled confidence among friendly forces and dread among adversaries. In that vibration of metal and air, there existed a profound emblem of the resources, ingenuity, and collective effort fueling the Allied war machine, a stark contrast to the lean and often strained apparatus of their German counterparts. Yet, the victory of the P-47 was not solely measured in downed aircraft or aerial kills. It represented a shift in ideology and possibility, the realization that relentless innovation, applied without restraint, could overturn assumptions about warfare. Where German aviators expected an easy challenge, they encountered a testament to industrial resilience. Where European critics mocked its bulk, the Thunderbolt demonstrated that power and endurance could redefine aerial engagement. And through it all, the machine itself, its guns, its engine, its imposing frame, became a symbol of a broader truth, that abundance, when harnessed with precision and courage, could not merely confront but transform the course of conflict. By the close of the first months of combat, the P-47 had carved a reputation not as a graceful dancer in the skies, but as a relentless guardian and avenger. Its presence forced reconsideration of strategies, compelled respect from the most seasoned adversaries, and altered the psychological landscape of air warfare. The American fighter, once ridiculed, became a standard against which others measured effectiveness. Its legacy extended beyond technical achievement. It embodied a conviction that material superiority, disciplined execution, and courage could combine to produce outcomes both devastating and decisive. And as the winter light waned over Normandy, the growl of the Thunderbolt faded into the distance, leaving behind more than wreckage and memory. It left a truth etched in both metal and ideology. That innovation, when unshackled by skepticism and empowered by abundance, could shift not only battles but the perception of what was possible in a world at war. By March of 1943, the P-47 Thunderbolt had begun to redefine the dynamics of the European skies. Morning fogs no longer concealed only the quiet devastation of bombed villages. They now harbored the unmistakable silhouette of the Jug, its wings cutting through the gray light with a certainty that unsettled German air patrols. The fighter's size, once derided as a flaw, became an asset. Pilots could absorb punishment that would have crippled lighter aircraft, and still return to base, engines droning steadily, wings intact. For the Luftwaffe, accustomed to opponents who relied on agility over armor, this resilience was shocking. Theirs was a doctrine built around nimbleness and finesse, not the raw, overwhelming power of massed American engineering. Each sortie revealed the profound gap between expectation and reality. German aviators, trained to anticipate flitting, evasive targets, found the P-47's approach uncompromising. It did not dance. It charged. Its 8.50 caliber machine guns, each synchronized to deliver concentrated bursts, carved a deadly corridor through enemy formations. Even seasoned pilots, confident in their ability to outmaneuver Allied fighters, were forced to acknowledge the Thunderbolt's lethality. Accounts from the period describe Luftwaffe crews watching in disbelief as entire formations of their aircraft were torn apart before they could respond effectively. The psychological toll was nearly as significant as the physical losses. Where confidence had once prevailed, hesitation crept in. Where strategy had been predictable, chaos now intruded. The P-47's impact extended beyond air-to-air combat. Bomber missions, once precarious ventures into hostile territory, gained a protective shield. The Thunderbolt's endurance allowed it to accompany slower, more vulnerable B-17 flying fortresses deep into occupied territory. For bomber crews, the presence of these robust fighters was transformative. They witnessed firsthand how the combined weight of firepower and armor could deter enemy attacks, reduce casualties, and increase the effectiveness of bombing campaigns. Over time, these missions yielded tangible results. Industrial targets were struck with greater precision, supply lines disrupted more effectively, and German morale subtly eroded under the unyielding American presence in the skies. Historical evidence underscores the profound shift in aerial warfare. Allied records show that by the spring of 1943, P-47 squadrons were achieving kill ratios that defied early skepticism. Mission reports detail multiple instances where the Thunderbolt, despite its size, outpaced and outgunned the Luftwaffe. Intelligence summaries from captured documents reveal a growing apprehension among German commanders. They had underestimated not only the aircraft but the industrial and logistical might behind it. Where a single enemy fighter had once seemed a manageable threat, now entire engagements were dominated by the overwhelming firepower and resilience of these American machines. Yet, the transformation wrought by the P-47 was not solely technical. It carried an emotional weight that resonated across both sides of the conflict. For American pilots, the Thunderbolt became a source of confidence, a tangible embodiment of the resources, ingenuity, and collective effort sustaining the Allied cause. The growl of its engine was more than a mechanical sound. It was a psychological signal, a reminder that they flew not as individuals, but as part of a nation capable of producing machines that could endure punishment and deliver devastating force. For German pilots, the same sound induced hesitation and doubt. The aircraft that had once been mocked as clumsy now demanded respect, reshaping attitudes toward American ingenuity and the broader trajectory of the air war. One recurring symbol emerged in these engagements: the relentless thrum of the Thunderbolt's engine. This sound, omnipresent in combat, came to represent more than operational capability. It was a marker of abundance, the capacity of a nation to produce not only functional machines but instruments of domination in the air. Each vibration, each note of mechanical certainty, became a reminder that American democracy, fueled by industry and collective will, could manifest tangible superiority in the form of both protection and destruction. Pilots internalized this symbolism, feeling the reassurance of a system capable of sustaining them even in the most extreme circumstances. The P-47's influence extended to the German perception of Allied strategy. Encounters with the Thunderbolt forced a reassessment of tactics, challenging long-held assumptions about fighter design and aerial combat doctrine. The aircraft's durability, heavy armament, and operational range demanded that the Luftwaffe adapt rapidly or risk catastrophic losses. Even those who had initially dismissed the Thunderbolt began to acknowledge its significance, documenting its effectiveness in post-mission reports and adjusting engagement strategies. This grudging respect marked a subtle yet profound shift in the psychology of aerial warfare. The recognition that raw power, when combined with intelligent design and disciplined execution, could upend established hierarchies of air combat. The transformation of perception was mirrored by tangible outcomes on the battlefield. Allied bombers, shielded by Thunderbolts, inflicted unprecedented damage on German infrastructure. Enemy supply lines were disrupted, and airfields were rendered vulnerable to sustained attacks. Reports from the field detail the astonishment of ground crews and commanders alike, observing aircraft returning with minimal damage despite heavy enemy fire. The Thunderbolt's reputation spread quickly, becoming synonymous with reliability, firepower, and endurance. Its very presence altered calculations. German pilots approached engagements with caution, Allied forces undertook missions with confidence, and the balance of aerial power shifted irrevocably. Through this period, the P-47 became a living embodiment of American industrial and military philosophy. Its performance underscored the principle that abundant resources, when applied with precision and purpose, could overcome skepticism and redefine expectations. In every sortie, each dive and climb, the aircraft reinforced a truth that extended beyond tactical advantage: that innovation, resilience, and the capacity to leverage material superiority could produce outcomes both dramatic and transformative. As spring light broke across the Normandy landscape, the Thunderbolt roared overhead, unrelenting in its presence. Its engines, its guns, its sheer mass spoke of a nation capable of projecting power with both discipline and abundance. For those on the ground, for pilots in the sky, and for the strategists in distant command centers, the P-47 symbolized more than a fighter aircraft. It embodied the intersection of ingenuity, courage, and industrial might. And in that intersection lay a lesson that would resonate far beyond the European theater. A lesson about the capacity of vision, preparation, and relentless determination to alter the course of war itself. By the summer of 1943, the P-47 Thunderbolt had evolved from a symbol of skepticism into a decisive instrument of Allied strategy. The aircraft, initially dismissed for its weight and size, now dominated skies from the sun-drenched fields of France to the rugged industrial heartlands of Germany. Its presence was no longer merely tactical. It had become psychological, influencing both the planning of missions and the mindset of those who faced it. Ground forces soon recognized the Thunderbolt's dual role. Beyond its air-to-air combat prowess, the P-47 excelled in close air support, strafing enemy positions with a ferocity that earned the respect and fear of both friend and foe. Its 8.50 caliber machine guns could tear through entrenched defenses, while its payload of bombs and rockets transformed it into a mobile artillery platform. During raids on German supply depots and armored columns, infantrymen on the ground would sometimes glimpse the silhouette of the Jug, descending at high speed, the thunder of its armament preceding the visible destruction. For Allied soldiers, this sound became a promise, a signal that support was near and that the weight of American industry and ingenuity was at their backs. The German experience, by contrast, was one of shock and adaptation. Pilots who had once relied on nimble maneuvers to dictate engagements found themselves caught off guard by an aircraft that could absorb punishment and respond with overwhelming firepower. Luftwaffe intelligence noted repeated encounters in which the Thunderbolt seemed impervious to standard fighter tactics, compelling the Germans to develop alternative strategies or risk annihilation. Reports described the bewilderment of enemy forces as P-47s emerged from cloud cover, attacked with devastating precision, and returned unscathed. It was an embodiment of industrial might, an object lesson in how material abundance, when expertly applied, could redefine the battlefield. Pilots of the Thunderbolt shared a unique perspective. Flying an aircraft heavier than most of its adversaries, they were acutely aware of its vulnerability yet simultaneously empowered by its strengths. The radial engine, capable of sustaining significant damage, allowed them to push the aircraft beyond limits that would ground lesser fighters. Its guns, synchronized and relentless, offered a sense of control in chaotic airspace. Many pilots recounted the almost meditative focus required to harness the machine's power, the rhythmic vibration of its engines serving as both guide and reassurance. In this way, the Thunderbolt became more than a tool of war. It was an extension of the pilot's own endurance and courage, a symbol of how human determination could be amplified by thoughtful design and overwhelming force. One emblematic moment captured the essence of this transformation. During a series of operations over the Ruhr Valley, Thunderbolts faced a concentration of German aircraft defending key industrial targets. Initial intelligence suggested a manageable engagement, but what unfolded was a dramatic display of firepower and resilience. P-47s entered formation, their engines producing a continuous, almost mechanical roar, and executed coordinated strafing and bombing runs. The Luftwaffe, expecting easier targets, found itself outgunned and outmaneuvered within the framework of its own doctrine. The encounter concluded with heavy German losses and minimal Allied casualties, a stark illustration of the Thunderbolt's influence on the course of operations. Historical documentation from these campaigns provides further insight. Allied mission logs highlight kill ratios that increasingly favored American forces, while reconnaissance and post-action reports emphasized the Thunderbolt's durability. German communications, intercepted and analyzed by Allied intelligence, reveal growing apprehension. Commanders acknowledged the aircraft's destructive capacity, noting its unusual combination of speed, firepower, and armor. Even officers initially dismissive of the design admitted that the P-47 had forced a reevaluation of what constituted effective fighter strategy. In essence, the aircraft had not only survived skepticism, it had imposed a new standard. The symbolic presence of the P-47 extended beyond mechanical performance. Its engines, a constant, deep hum, came to signify more than combat capability. They represented industrial abundance, strategic foresight, and democratic resolve. For pilots and ground troops alike, the vibration of metal and machinery carried a message that American innovation and resources could manifest in tangible superiority, creating an environment in which both bravery and preparation were amplified. The sound of the Thunderbolt's engine became a narrative thread, linking disparate missions and campaigns, a continuous reminder of the power behind the war effort. Through these operations, the ideological impact of the P-47 became increasingly evident. Its very existence challenged preconceptions about what American aviation could achieve. German pilots, accustomed to measuring skill through agility and precision, confronted an aircraft that prioritized resilience and raw power. Allied forces, conversely, found reassurance in its design, recognizing that technological abundance could reinforce tactical innovation. The aircraft was no longer simply a tool. It was a statement about American capability, a symbol of how collective resources and ingenuity could produce decisive outcomes on a global scale. The human dimension of the Thunderbolt experience cannot be overstated. Pilots who flew the Jug endured long missions, often under extreme conditions, yet were bolstered by the machine's reliability. Ground crews maintained these aircraft with precision, ensuring that each sortie could be executed with minimal risk of mechanical failure. This synergy between human skill and mechanical might exemplify the broader American approach to warfare: coordinated, resource-intensive, and strategically informed. The P-47 became a living embodiment of this philosophy, demonstrating that success in combat was not only about individual heroism, but also about harnessing the full spectrum of national capability. As the summer of 1943 progressed, the Thunderbolt's influence extended to Allied planning and morale. Its presence enabled deeper penetration into German-held territory, facilitating strikes that disrupted supply chains and weakened defensive positions. The aircraft's durability meant that pilots could operate with greater confidence, pushing further into hostile airspace and returning to base intact. Each mission reinforced a larger narrative: that technological innovation, backed by industrial capacity and disciplined execution, could yield both immediate tactical advantage and long-term strategic impact. The recurring motif of the P-47's engines persisted throughout these campaigns, a sonic symbol of American abundance and resilience. Where German pilots heard threat and inevitability, Allied forces heard reassurance and capability. In the hum of the radial engine, the clatter of .50 caliber machine guns, and the swoop of the aircraft across contested skies, a broader lesson emerged: that resources, when expertly applied, could amplify human determination and reshape the battlefield. The Thunderbolt was more than an aircraft. It was a conduit through which ideology, innovation, and industrial strength converged, leaving an indelible mark on the European theater. By the autumn of 1943, the P-47 Thunderbolt had become synonymous with overwhelming presence in the European skies. Its reputation, once tethered to skepticism and mockery, now preceded it in both Allied and German operational planning. The aircraft was no longer merely a participant in aerial combat. It had become a decisive force capable of shaping the outcomes of engagements before a single bullet was fired. The fall campaigns presented a complex theater of operations. Industrial centers, transportation hubs, and fortified positions demanded the kind of precision and resilience that only the Thunderbolt could provide. Bombing formations, particularly the B-17 flying fortresses, relied heavily on P-47 escorts. Without these robust fighters, bomber crews faced catastrophic losses, but with the Thunderbolt overhead, German interception attempts were often repelled with devastating efficiency. The 8.50 caliber machine guns, synchronized with meticulous timing, created corridors of lethal fire that German aircraft could scarcely navigate. Reports from these missions often describe entire enemy formations disintegrating under the relentless hail of fire, while American pilots maintained formation cohesion with remarkable discipline. The psychological dimension of this dominance cannot be overstated. German pilots, already reeling from the Thunderbolt's previous sorties, confronted a persistent, nearly mechanical threat. The aircraft's radial engine emitted a continuous, low-frequency growl that resonated even before visual contact was made, signaling not only impending attack but also the certainty of sustained firepower. The Luftwaffe, which had prided itself on strategic agility and aerial finesse, found these engagements increasingly stressful and demoralizing. Memoirs and after-action reports reveal repeated references to the unexpected endurance and aggressive tactics of the P-47. Where once German forces could anticipate the rhythm of Allied air attacks, the Thunderbolt introduced unpredictability through sheer power and resilience. Meanwhile, Allied pilots developed an intimate understanding of their aircraft's capabilities. The P-47 demanded respect for its weight, yet rewarded skillful handling with extraordinary survivability. Many pilots recount surviving engagements that would have destroyed lighter aircraft, returning to base with critical damage sustained yet undeterred. The tactile experience of the Thunderbolt, its vibrations, engine tone, and response to control inputs, became a source of confidence, a living indicator of the synergy between human decision and mechanical capability. For ground crews, the aircraft was a testament to American engineering and logistics. A machine that could be maintained, repaired, and returned to combat with speed and reliability. This interaction reinforced a broader ideological truth: that coordination, resource allocation, and technological foresight were as decisive as individual valor in the conduct of war. The P-47's transformative effect extended beyond individual encounters. By late 1943, mission planning increasingly centered around the aircraft's range, durability, and firepower. Close air support operations demonstrated its versatility, as the Thunderbolt shifted seamlessly from high-altitude escort to low-level strikes against enemy armor and supply depots. Infantry units lauded its precision and lethality. German forces feared its persistent presence over contested terrain. Historical documentation reflects this dual impact. Airfield reports describe the aircraft's ability to destroy fuel depots and armored columns, while intercepted communications reveal the frustration of commanders attempting to counter an opponent whose combination of speed, armor, and firepower defied conventional tactics. A recurring emblem of the Thunderbolt's identity, the roar of its engine, served both symbolic and practical purposes. Pilots came to recognize the sound as an indicator of capability, its presence affirming the security of their formations and the reach of American industrial power. To German observers, it was a harbinger of destruction, a psychological instrument that augmented the physical effects of the aircraft. In this sense, the P-47 functioned as both weapon and messenger, a tangible representation of abundance, resilience, and democratic determination, broadcast across contested skies. The machine itself communicated strategy and ideology, bridging the gap between mechanical engineering and national identity. The evolution of tactical doctrine surrounding the Thunderbolt also illustrates its influence on broader strategic considerations. Allied commanders recognized that the aircraft's combination of heavy armament and survivability allowed for more aggressive operations deeper into enemy territory. German defensive measures, in contrast, were increasingly reactive. Intelligence briefings and mission debriefings highlight the Luftwaffe's struggle to adapt to a threat whose capabilities challenged pre-existing paradigms. Where conventional fighters had relied on agility and calculated strikes, the Thunderbolt introduced an imbalance through mass, firepower, and endurance, a triad of qualities that reshaped both engagement and perception. This period of engagement underscored the intersection of technological prowess and ideological messaging. The P-47 was not simply a combat aircraft. It embodied principles central to the Allied war effort. Its presence demonstrated the capacity of a democratic, industrially capable nation to project power decisively and reliably. For pilots, its performance reinforced confidence in American ingenuity. For German forces, its destructive capability challenged assumptions about the limits of resistance. In every sortie, every strafing run, and every engagement, the Thunderbolt served as a conduit for these larger truths, translating the abstract concepts of abundance, coordination, and innovation into immediate tactical advantage. By the closing months of 1943, the aircraft's legend had crystallized. Stories circulated among Allied pilots of missions where Thunderbolts returned with critical damage yet continued to dominate enemy aircraft. Ground units recounted the devastating effectiveness of strafing runs on supply convoys. Even the Luftwaffe's own reports acknowledged the P-47 as a force that could no longer be underestimated. The cumulative impact of these campaigns extended beyond immediate battlefield results. The aircraft reshaped strategic planning, morale, and the perception of American air power throughout the European theater. In reflecting on these operations, the recurring symbol of the Thunderbolt's engine emerges as a connective thread. Its roar, ever present, came to signify not only mechanical reliability, but the broader reach of American resources and strategic vision. It was a reminder that technological innovation, disciplined execution, and industrial capacity could converge to redefine the limits of possibility in war. The P-47 had evolved from a subject of ridicule into an emblem of strategic power, a living testament to the efficacy of abundant resources wielded with precision and courage. As autumn light waned over bomb-scarred landscapes, the Thunderbolt continued to patrol, strike, and dominate. Its guns and engines were more than instruments of destruction. They were carriers of ideology, symbols of an approach to warfare that married material advantage with human determination. In every dive over enemy positions, every escort of vulnerable bombers, and every sortie across contested skies, the Thunderbolt reaffirmed a central truth: that when capability, ingenuity, and resolve intersect, the bounds of expectation are shattered, and the course of history itself can be altered. By the winter of 1944, the P-47 Thunderbolt had secured its place as one of the most formidable aircraft in the Allied arsenal. Its reputation, hard-earned through relentless sorties and countless engagements, extended across every sector of the European theater. What had begun as skepticism and ridicule had transformed into awe and respect, not only for the aircraft itself but for the broader system of ingenuity, industry, and coordination it represented. As the cold mornings blanketed the European countryside in frost and fog, formations of thunderbolts carved across the sky, their engines droning steadily like a promise of protection and retribution. Allied bombers, once perilously exposed to German fighters, now flew beneath a ceiling of firepower that had become a defining characteristic of air superiority. Each mission reinforced the lessons learned over the preceding years, that resilience, combined with overwhelming firepower, could negate traditional advantages in maneuverability and speed. The 8.50 caliber machine guns were no longer an experimental feature. They were instruments of dominance, delivering justice from the air with methodical precision. The human dimension of the Thunderbolt's legacy was equally profound. Pilots who had flown the aircraft through freezing dawns, over industrial centers, and across enemy territory carried with them not only memories of destruction wrought, but also an intimate understanding of the balance between human skill and mechanical might. Ground crews, maintaining and repairing these machines with exacting precision, ensured that the cycle of deployment and return could continue with minimal interruption. Together, these men and machines demonstrated a principle as old as war itself. Victory belongs not only to courage but to preparation, resource, and discipline. The German perspective, by this stage of the conflict, reflected a grudging acknowledgement of the P-47's transformative power. Intelligence reports, pilot memoirs, and post-war analyses describe repeated encounters with the Jug that left Luftwaffe aviators awed and unsettled. The aircraft's durability, heavy armament, and operational range rendered conventional tactics insufficient. For many German pilots, the Thunderbolt was no longer simply an opponent. It was a manifestation of a system whose industrial capacity and strategic foresight exceeded what they had anticipated. The experience challenged assumptions, forced adaptation, and reshaped the psychological landscape of aerial combat. Central to the Thunderbolt's narrative was the recurring symbol of its engine, the growl of the radial power plant that preceded action and lingered long after. This sound, heard across forests, fields, and urban centers, became emblematic of American abundance and democratic industrial might. It was not merely a mechanical note but a statement of capability, a reassurance to allies, and a harbinger of consequence to adversaries. Through its vibrations, the P-47 communicated a larger truth, that a society capable of producing such machines in quantity, with precision and under pressure, could translate material advantage into both tactical success and strategic dominance. The philosophical implications of the P-47 service were equally resonant. It illustrated that innovation, endurance, and firepower could not only overcome skepticism but redefine the expectations of an entire theater of war. Where German pilots expected fragile, easily outmaneuvered opponents, they encountered machines that absorbed punishment and delivered destruction with impunity. Where critics had dismissed its weight and size, the Thunderbolt demonstrated that brute strength, when harnessed effectively, could reshape doctrine and force reevaluation of tactical norms. The aircraft became a living testament to the principle that abundant resources, applied intelligently, could produce disproportionate results, an embodiment of both national resolve and ideological assertion. Even as the conflict pressed on into the spring of 1945, the Thunderbolt's legacy endured. Its contributions were measured not only in aircraft destroyed or missions completed but in the psychological and ideological shifts it catalyzed. Allied forces grew emboldened, German resistance adapted but never fully overcame its shadow, and historians later recognized the aircraft as a turning point in the evolution of aerial warfare. The Thunderbolt had proven that material abundance, coupled with human skill and strategic foresight, could produce effects beyond the immediate battlefield, influencing perceptions, doctrine, and the broader trajectory of the war. In reflecting on the P-47's journey, one returns repeatedly to the symbolic resonance of its engines, its guns, and its physical presence in the skies. These elements, tangible and immediate, served as metaphors for the democratic ideals underpinning the American war effort: abundance, resilience, and the disciplined application of power. The aircraft became more than a fighter. It became an emissary of national capability, a reminder that freedom and ingenuity were inseparable from the resources and determination required to defend them. As the European skies began to clear in the months following victory, the Thunderbolt remained a symbol of what had been achieved. Its roar no longer accompanied daily combat, yet its lessons echoed in military doctrine, strategic thought, and collective memory. It demonstrated that technology and ideology were not separate forces but mutually reinforcing agents of change. Where once derision had greeted its design, admiration and respect now prevailed, marking the P-47 as an enduring emblem of how preparation, abundance, and unyielding will could redefine the course of conflict. And so, when one hears the imagined growl of its engine above a quiet field, or envisions its 8 synchronized guns cutting through a winter sky, it is impossible to separate the machine from its message. The P-47 Thunderbolt was never merely a fighter. It was a declaration that the combination of innovation, resilience, and resourcefulness could challenge expectations, overcome ridicule, and affirm the ideals of a nation determined to wield both freedom and abundance with unwavering purpose. In its shadow, history learned a lesson that resonates far beyond any single battlefield. Power, when informed by principle and executed with precision, becomes enduring.